Well, what should we do for introduction? It's a vague teaching on the influences of black metal. I think I'll stop like around 90 because that's a whole different ballgame. But first I'm going to take it into the 80s, okay? From first song on first Black Sabbath. Because it goes like dun, dun, dun. And when I made riffs for the last Darkthrone album now, I still use those notes, like sort of bass for a lot of the riffs. And a lot of people have been using that to make the grim or even eerie sound, and that song just plays deliberately on that particular riff from most of the song. So, and a spooky cover to boot. Moving on to maybe not the typical, but let's just include Motorhead for good taste. We have had some Motorhead parts in Darkthrone, and I have heard no complaints, if you know what I mean. Some tougher bands of the 80s that I will come to has also used some Motorhead, like Bulldozer from Italy, I guess, for one. And then we of course we could have like, okay. And then Venom, of course. I'm doing this simple now because we basically just had this from the 70s. Also, a lot of metal people tend to be my age, or a little bit older, or a lot younger, and we were just tiny tots at the time. We didn't really venture into the obscure. Venom, the oldies favorite, of course. But still popular with lots of younger kids. Because it's popular with the older ones, I guess. They want to find some essence there. All right, from Venom, I guess there were a lot of people hooking on to that imagery. We had, like, of course, Judas Priest too, looking a bit tough, you know, leathering up and all that shit. Venom started using the whole satanic gimmickry, and it got a lot of people starting from the likes of Metallica, I guess, were huge Venom fans, to the likes of the more obscure bands that popped up. Venom had rotten production, and a lot of people just frowned at it, you know, what the hell is this? So it was sort of excluding, whereas Judas Priest excluded, of course, the rest of the world, but all the people into rock and the heavy shit, like Judas Priest. I guess Venom was one of the bands that really divided some of the metal scene. I mean, in attitude and also taste. But there were rotten production, sure. You could say even lo-fi. graphic imagery. Of course, the leather and some swords were there, and you know, the whole leather and spike package. Mythical, let's call it stage names. Alias. Hellhammer. Of course, it went on to become the Mighty Mouse, Celtic Frost. Excellent writing there. Now in the States, there was this thrash metal emerging from the aftermath of the new wave of British heavy metal, the nuevo. And the Americans had, Metallica sums it up because it was metallic. At the same time, you had this more, beats me why, but from Europe, you had bands wanting to make the same metallic music, but they ended up sounding more obscure and more obscure lyrics, totally into the occult thing. Destruction. And Sodom. I think the links between Venom and Sodom are really obvious if you can listen to the early material of Sodom. Could also include the creator, but they moved away from the occult pretty quickly, but they used to be called Tormentor, and it was they looked like proper European metalheads at the time, you know. Not so influenced by Venom, but later on came bands like Mercyful Fate, early 90s black metal parties in Norway always played early Mercyful Fate. There was no skipping on that, I can tell you. It was mandatory. Released at least 2 excellent albums with focus on occult lyrics, being pretty serious about that. The music was in the aftermath of new wave of British metal, like excellent musician and all that, but still first Mercyful Fate album, pretty shabby. I got a few points regarding Mercyful Fate, actually. The seriousness of the lyrics, especially for me in the second Mercyful Fate album, sort of converted me into the whole satanic approach. I don't really think early creator demo convinced a lot of people or made them think a lot about the subject, but he's bringing some Laveyan aspects into it, which is well, now and 10 years ago it was more of a discussed subject. There was almost a dividing factor, even either you were on a LaVeyan or you were not. The initial idea of black metal from the likes of Euronymous really, he did not exclude Mercyful Fate, but he did not want black metal to be a LaVeyan thing. He thought that black metal had nothing to do with that at all. I guess I'm I can agree with it, but still, Mercyful Fate, they don't exactly they don't have a lot to answer for. They did great shit. So they I just enjoy doing this so much. America. USA, yeah. They probably had over here, they had like Possessed. Yeah, Slayer. Huge point. It was about the same time here. Of course. Can I like wipe that shit out? Well, attitude-wise, I'd definitely say first Slayer's black metal, because their thrash at the time that they were probably attempting to do was not very convincing, but it was definitely metal, and it was black. One of the few, I guess, big American bands that had some cult or satanic grim or whatever lyrics. And one important point is that they became huge from that fundament which they started at. In the scene at that time, it was normal when a band became big, like Slayer. The lyrics grow more conventional. It was a thing in the 80s scene that was often discussed about wimping out both musically, lyrically. I don't think Slayer did that. Slayer has still huge respect. Came big. But there were an ear opener, because they started using all those half note riffs that became death metal. But still, they look fucking black. And when Slayer had that fucking video live, I'm talking about entire European television, music television. The first meeting with Slayer was live. Fucking evil sounding. Shit, they're not. And I guess if you liked it, you were onto something. You were hearing death metal without really knowing it. Possessed call themselves death metal, but they didn't really invent anything there. They just played metal slash thrash metal with the usual occult frame. Death metal is really a way to play. Like most people would say, Norwegian black metal. Black metal now is a certain way of playing riffs. Well, I'm trying to show why Norwegian black metal became what it became. All the influences are here. Yeah. All right. Bathory. I guess they quickly convinced at least 80% of Venom's early fans. That was a lot. And they were pretty much alone in the world doing what sounded like a speeded up Venom demo tape. And it was released, and I guess the distribution was huge. And for people into these things, when they saw Bathory, that was just a Klingon. Sure, I'm digging this. I was young at the time. I didn't catch it like this. I had to see it in retrospect. But I guess I won't have a lot of people saying against me. You should maybe have an older guy here that has seen everything saying, "That's correct, Fenriz. Oh, Fenriz, I don't know about that one." But I'm running the show here. Bathory. Also at the same time, bands like Mayhem popping up. We gotta go here with Bathory, I guess. Bathory. It's beautiful just to write it. Biggest inspiration on the Norwegian scene. And probably globally, like as well. Sped up Venom demo, and then later rather quickly added atmosphere, we had enough metal from before, so Bathory mysteriously added this atmosphere to it, furthermore dividing the metal scene into, well, this ain't metal, but it's sure as hell obscure. And the people that went with Bathory, I guess, had to end up in a black metal 90s rally. Next step, around 88, from the late 80s, they include the whole Viking. pagan vibe. Also a big hit, as we see in the 90s. So as we see from the facts here, it's clear that Bathory, in my eyes, is really the most important band. He also had the very raspy, witchy vocals. Let's go back, I gotta have some perspective here. No, not a lot of rasping, no. Pretty raspless. I don't know. At the same time, around this time we had more metal fucked up bands like Bulldozer, I guess. I guess Root from the East Block probably happened around here. I'm not too sure. I've been skipping some Root classes, you might say. We're nearing into 1986 now, which is probably my favorite year of metal altogether, but we gotta focus on black metal. When I've come this far as Bathory, the web is starting to unfold clearly. When you listen to the first Bathory album, the rasping voice is probably the one that you will hear from the Norwegian sound in the 90s trend that you will hear most similarities to. The second Bathory album is extremely obscure sounding. This one was more like Venomish rock and roll. They're moving away from it on the second album. And then they're dropping the third Bathory album, which carries most similarities to the 90s scene of all albums of the 80s. The Black Mark album. This is where the audience should go, duh! Number one essential album. I think I'm through with Bathory. All these bands have released albums. Now in the underground, you get into the underground by, I don't know, maybe a record store where people writing fanzines try to sell their fanzines to the guy at the counter. That's how I got it. And then, boom, you're into the fucking underground. And then there's lots of bands, myriads of occult bands that have been influenced by all these throughout the 80s, which has also been important for myself. I could mention Poison from Germany, that never made it. Just had to quit. I should have talked a little bit more, but this is just an example. I can take some others if you have like, yeah, Obscurity from Sweden. You had demonic, if I may say so, sounding band from Australia, Slaughter Lord. Let's say we're talking starting 85, 86. We have albums out by Slaughter from Canada. That's strictly for connoisseurs, actually, but hugely inspired by Celtic Frost. That's important. Not a lot of bands were actually early Napalm Death was Celtic Frost inspired. You have Middle Europe, no, the Middle American scene. I'm just kidding, of course. No bands from Honduras that I know of released anything at the time, but you had South America, early Sepultura. Yeah, let's include them. Don Kay of Death Vine Column in Kerrang at the time said that they had a sound that would turn flowers black. Not an extreme metaler with any extreme metaler with pride would check them out. And of course, you couldn't get it in the store. You had to write it, to send money to get it. Early Sepultura. And one of the absolutely finest bands to like, even nowadays, for the old school, or if you're a new school kid and like this. Sarcophago, first album, Inri. Get it if you can, get it while you can. I mean, at this time, 85, 86, 87, we had thrash metal peaking, death metal starting. First death metal album, let's just say that the first death metal album was Death, first Death album, out in 87. You can imagine the trend always comes 4 years, 5 years after the initial. King Diamond, of course, had his Paint. Mayhem used Corpse Paint, I guess, later when they got Dead from Morbid. Morbid was a Swedish band at the time. Actually, we could have like a fist. Paint. There wasn't much paint. Photos you have of some of these bands aren't very clear. It's pretty obscure, some of it, but they've luckily grown to become cult acts nowadays. Damn, I was onto something, but I forgot. Well, you have 87 starts pop up things like Darkthrone, Rotten Christ from from Greece. But I'm mentioning this as a main band from Greece, but the Greek actually had mostly occult acts and very poorly always produced, not with any force behind it, and there was quickly established a sound that would later be called the Greek sound, had a sound of their own. It wasn't like Italia had the sound of their own. The Greek sound existed. We have had Greek sound, Swedish sound, Norwegian sound, not Danish sound. Let's say, have we forgot some countries then? England, we might as well include Onslaught. Weren't that hot though? Time of '86, there were almost no trash bands with a occult bag. '87 had 86, '87 had Sabbath from England starting up with some pentagrams thrown in for good measure and pretty anti-Christian lyrics. I also have Sabbath from Japan, which is still going, but they're metal rebels, metal warriors. I'll use this one now. Can I? Oops. Here we have the East Bloc, two big bands. It was, of course, Tormentor from Hungary. And Master's Hammer. Mayhem. Oh, spell incorrectly as well. No, I can't write unexplainable anymore. But what? Yes. That doesn't look right. Unexplainable grimness. Started out in '84, I guess, around there. And it was the only Norwegian band, so it's sort of special for us. Later came Vomit, but Mayhem, let's talk about Mayhem. They had huge problems in the late 80s when bands like us and Emperor and Cadaver was starting to buck up for the big metal battle. But still, they released the Death Crush Mini, and they just lived on reputation only in the late 80s. I went to rehearsals and came like awestruck back, and they did a show in like '89, which is legendary. Dead with the corpse paint and all. Got the corpse paint started again. Let's just call it a corpse paint. Revival. Sarcophago. Use corpse paint. And they're fucking from Brazil. I'm telling you, man. You're almost in itself, in himself it's like an aspect to Mayhem. You want to include. He was keeping a lot of the occult scene. I guess he was one of the people that kept all these bands together and all the other obscure bands in the underground. Because what I'm describing here is not a musical style. It's a different bands that has something to do. It sounds, a lot of them totally different. Has something to do with metal, something to do with obscurity, something to do with the occult. So there's no style. So there's no people buying it. You know, like death metal was starting to get big here. Thrash metal was selling shitloads. Like didn't have anyone buying this stuff, so there was an underground thing. Euronymous plus I have to say that they invented the typical Norwegian black metal riff. It was sort of derived from Bathory, but it was a new way of playing a riff that was had really not been done and not been stylized by anyone before. That's what Snorre and Euronymous did, and to my knowledge they did this in '89. Well, you have a chord and you have fuzz, but you don't play one and one, you play one and one, up and down, and you have the notes cling together so that you have the fucking eerie notes and they all stream together, creating this incredible eerie sound. Like, sends fucking chills down your spine if you're able to adapt it. Darkthrone were at this time, 88, 89, we had gone the route from getting into the underground via Slayer, getting all this stuff, but we were following the metal wind, one could say. Started playing thrash, onto playing death, and a lot of these groups aren't really what we call typical death metal that came from America. And that was what we played, and a lot of the scene, both underground and overground scene, was pretty death metal based at this time. I would just want to say the reason why I started to listen to this shit again for the second time and then understanding it differently. Euronymous, of course, understood this the whole time through because it was older than me and got it all the way. I came in here, had to go there. One summer I was listening to a death metal compilation tape. One song by Tormentor there. That was not death metal, but it was like all this, just mid-80s, all together, one song made me say, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I listening to death metal? This is it. I'm taking out my old albums. And from there, I just started listening to that. And then I started, at the time, I of course knew what Mayhem was doing, but we were really involved in the death metal thing. But from there on, I started listening to this shit again, and I started getting more interest in talking to people that were into the same shit. Therefore, we started later hanging around Mayhem a bit more. So Tormentor, 89, turned my fucking head again. On to the 90s. Let's just say 90, let's be kind. Mayhem, the black metal riff, Mayhem starts making new songs, which has these riffs. Basically, Mayhem was the first Norwegian black metal band in the forefront, the avant-garde. around 91 or something, or 90, Mayhem releases a live album, which we could safely say is the first Norwegian black metal album. A lot of people says it's our second album, Blaze Northern Sky. Some people say it's the first Bursum, but it's basically wrong. Live in Leipzig from Mayhem is the first. I forgot. I gotta say, man, in '91 when Euronymous opened up shop, there really weren't a lot of bands apart from this going for the black metal sound. Of course, I have like later on it's. I could even add something here for fun of it. Let's see, 90. At the time, Bathory was still sort of going, but had no black metal appeal left. We started losing track in '93, something like that. I'd be like away from the scene for a year, and then not really listening to what other people did, and then I made like riffs for the Transylvanian Hunger album and stuff. Sigurd told me like, well, you know, it's okay, but everyone else is doing this now. Are they? God damn it! The Norwegian black metal riff had like exploded. Everyone's making their version of it. Basically '93 stuff. Yeah. It starts to get shady from here, I'm telling you. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm just calling it the Myriads, and that's it. But at the time here, we really had no press at all. It was just this Norwegian clique, and we were all listening to all that, more or less, give or take a few bands for, and that's why we had a similar sound. After almost actually was starting a label was probably cool for like 80 people around the world. Like really globally, because it's always been global. Euronymous made a big point by having a huge map in his office, having pins in the map from where he had contacts. I always want to have contacts in Africa and shit like that. He craved that. The quality of the music, for instance, was not important for him, as long as it were from a troubled situation that it was supposed to be like a struggle to be a metaler. You should be hated. Important. I'm feeling like I'm feeling like I'm going to feel when I complete the Darkthrone album. One huge chore that I feel sliding off my shoulders now. Yeah.